Hello everyone and welcome on the Transport, Telecommunication and Energy webinars organized by PECB. My name is Mustafa Bislimi, the PECB organizer of this webinar, and today's topic is ISO 29001-2010 Supplemental Requirements and Impact of ISO 9001-2015. If you have doubted what are the comparisons and differences of 29001 and ISO 9001, this is a chance to learn it. You will also see the requirements and what impact does quality management system has in oil and gas industry, especially the requirements of ISO 29001. The webinar will be held in 2 sessions, today and next week at the same time, and will be presented by a PECB trainer, David Smart, who is the Managing Director of Smart ISO Systems, with experience of more than 40 years in multiple fields related to ISO standards. Attendees, please write your questions and comments in the question box in the right-hand control panel, or you can use the function of raise hand. We unmute you and you will have a chance to ask questions directly, and Mr. David will answer to them. Please, David, you may start the presentation.
Thank you, Mustafa. Good morning, everyone, or evening or afternoon, wherever you are. I'm just going to launch right into it. We don't have a lot of time, so here we go. So the first slide talks about Annex A in the 9001-2000A, saying that it's not considered part of the technical spec. I think these notes are self-explanatory. It just makes a difference between the technical spec put together with the API, the American Petroleum Industry, and the parts relating to ISO 9001. Now, often the terms are poorly understood by lay people, so I've just put together 4 little terms. Customer, purchaser, control feature, and product realization. So it's just my trying to get something on the table to make it crystal clear to lay people, not so much to yourselves. So the next slide talks about we can have exclusion clauses only under clause 7 in ISO 9001. In the 29000 standard, exclusions are more limited. For example, 7.3 product identity traceability, 7.6 control and monitor and measure devices. The current exclusions clause 1.2 in the 2008 version 9001 was originally introduced following the decision to withdraw the 9002 and 9003 standards in 2000. A means had to be found to enable organizations with quality management systems that did not include all of the requirements in 9001-2000 for technical reasons, but which had previously been able to meet the requirements of the 9002 and the 9003 standard to be able to claim conformity to it. The resultant solution was clause 1.2. The new standard has taken, I'm talking about the 9000 standard, has taken a different approach to the way that the requirements are stated compared to the earlier versions. Consequently, there should no longer be any technical reasons for an organization's QMS not to be able to meet all of the requirements in the new standard. I've given an example. A design was often excluded from the quality management system because they thought it was too complicated to include. This will no longer be the case. You're only allowed to have an exclusion if the process is not part of your operation. As an example, you wouldn't have calibration in the service industry. The important point to make on this slide is that the onus is on your organization to ensure the outsourced sub-process, for example spray painting or plating, meets your customer's requirements. There are a number of ways you can achieve it. The principle being that your subcontractor gives you the confidence that the sub-process you have subcontracted to meets your customer requirements. And an example I'm giving is test results could be sent with each batch as an example that the onus being placed on the supplier. Under the 2015 version ISO 9001, there's now no need to have a quality manual. Any charts or things like that, things that you think is relevant that traditionally were part of the quality manual, quality policy, can be found a home in the front of your procedures manual. As soon, of course, the 29,000 is amended to meet the 2015 standard, which might not happen. There's a requirement in 29,001 to record the revision status on a master list to know what documents and forms are in the system. From the user point of view, this makes it easy as they can cross-reference them to know they have the current version of the procedure or form. However, in the 9000 version, there's no need to have the revision numbers on forms, but they still have to be controlled and traceable back to master copy. Now, nowadays that we're getting away from paper systems much more, it's not so relevant or old documentation. If you've got an electronic version that everybody can read on the screen, then there is only one version of it. But sometimes in harsh environments or places where terminals can't be, sometimes you have to make little mini manuals or service engineers go out in the field, things like that. They need to have a paper copy of the procedure. But now with phones and that, these are largely becoming obsolete as well. So next slide. ISO 9001-2008 version has two clauses, 4.2.3 document control and 4.2.3 record control. Now these are combined as subclause 752, creating and updating, and 7.5.3, control of documented information. Documented information will be controlled and maintained by an organization and the medium on which it is contained. And there's a note, two notes in fact. Documented information can be in any format and media from any source. This attempts to make it clear what a document is. For example, work instructions can be pictures, audio tapes, any form of electronic medium or paper copies. Documented information refers to the QMS, including related processes, information created in order for the organization to operate. And I'm talking about documentation, and then the record side here, evidence or results. We can see from the previous slide that there are changes in the way documents and records are managed and controlled. In the past, 29001 has followed the changes made to 9001 as it's based on this standard with additional API requirements. Whether this will happen in the future remains to be seen. And I've taken an example from the direction the medical devices are going in now. This traditionally has followed the 9001 route, but now is going in a different direction. But they've adopted the technical changes, so I would imagine that the technical changes, for instance, the document control and things like that, will follow the same suit as it's done in the past. But I don't know. That's just a personal opinion. Now, all too often, quality policies are cribbed from the internet and do not reflect the values and ethics of the company. The top team should all be involved with putting the quality policy together, as that is the core of the quality management system. Also, they should all approve it, not just get the quality manager the right one and then get the president in the States, the managing director in Europe to sign and date it. It is a key document and should be regularly reviewed to ensure that it still meets the values and ethics the company have. It is important also to test the understanding by employees on how the quality policy impacts on their jobs and their contribution to ensuring the policy is adhered to. All too often it's a set of fancy words, or the mission statements adopted as the quality policy, again with lots of adjectives that it's only wallpaper. It has no meaning or resonance to anybody in the organisation. Never mind the management team. Again, under the 2015 version in 9001, the scope, the organisation must consider both the quality policies and objectives are aligned with the strategic direction of the organisation. I mean, I've had many discussions on what quality objectives are, and the thing now is that under the 2015 version 9001, there's going to have to be a cultural change in an organisation. Some people disagree with that. They just think it's making it a bit more clearer, but the Chartered Quality Institute in this country, the UK, have made it clear that they see it as a big cultural change. There's a lot of discussion around how often management reviews should take place. The 9000 standard does not define how often these reviews take place, whereas the 29000 states they'll take place at least annually. This is often interpreted as the whole of the standard over a 3-year period. Myself, I take the viewpoint that it should be done every quarter. My thinking is that if the financial performance is reported quarterly, which is standard practice, then the quality management system performance should also be reported every quarter. This is an additional source of data to manage the business around. The broader a base and the source of data is taken from will result in better quality decisions taken to manage the business around. You can compare apples with apples, and if the financials vary from the quality ones, they should be investigated, especially as the financial reports are all lagging indicators. For example, how we performed over the previous 3 months. Management reviews will only be effective if data is recorded correctly in the first place. If the culture in the organisation is a blame one, then the issues will be covered up, not recorded, so there will be none to analyse and report on. The culture in the organisation needs to be that errors are an opportunity to improve, not to be used to apportion blame. The new ISO 9001 will require a cultural change in the organisation if putting the QMS at the heart of the business rather than a bolt-on or quality control system. Now again, there's a change of emphasis on the 9000. The training side of it, the clause, has been broadened to cover everyone in the organisation, not just those associated with quality. It was often said that quality is everybody's business, and then it becomes nobody's business. There's a need to conduct training needs analysis, probably writing job descriptions, doing periodic reviews of them, having appraisals to ensure that ongoing business needs are being met. The term product realization has been dropped by the latest version 9001 and is now going to be called operation. The product realization term was never really understood by the rank and file users or procedures. Hopefully this will be solved by the new terminology. In the glossary side I did in the presentation earlier, I went through the definition of the term product realization. This is the clause which I find the most problems with, whether it's 29,000 or 9,000. Often the clauses in the contract are accepted without due consideration being given to whether they can be fulfilled or not. The attitude is we will worry about how we're going to do the job after we get the contract. This is very short-sighted and often comes back to bite the butt of the company when they start the contract with rework and reputation loss because they've accepted the contract without realising its implications. I mean, as a simple example, I worked for a company that provided video equipment and they got a big contract to provide video equipment in child abuse cases so the child didn't need to give evidence in open court. Now, the contract was all written in legal jargon and the clause said in it you had to accept it as this, you could not clarify it. When I phoned up and inquired about the contract, if the people understood it, the salespeople, I was told that was just legal jargon and not to bother about it. And I said to them that the contract would need to go to the company's legal representative to look at. And I went to the directors of the company I worked for, and that was one of the things I raised with them. And subsequently, the contract was dropped because it was going to be far too difficult to fulfill in practice. So that's just one example of a contract review that was not understood. I could give you literally hundreds of examples. Design starts with a design brief, a concept. What are we trying to do? All too often design engineers fly by the seat of their pants, saying they have to have flexibility to think on their feet and change things. Planning is exactly what it says it is. If a decision is reached, then the rationale and that the decision was made around should be documented. All too often these decisions are verbal and forgotten why they were made later on in the process. The entire design process must be documented. There's a tendency to be fluid in the approach by design engineers. They argue that the design is constantly changing and it will be documented at the end. The point being made here is that each stage of the development of the design must be documented and the reasoning of why it was adopted along with the limitations and assumptions that were made. It starts off with a concept, then the inputs and outputs defined along with the calculations to verify the design and also the validation methods used. Any changes to design must have design reviews documented throughout the design's life cycle. Finally, it must be released for manufacture with the necessary sign-offs. Often the design and manufacturing phases run concurrently these days. When it even more important to have auditable controls in place. When designing inputs, the design engineer must explore what is available to him in the way of materials and the component parameters, along with any restrictions put on them by the customer. And I was thinking about one job that we got years ago when I worked for a mechanical company that supplied fittings into the oil industry. We had to use austenitic steel, which put certain restrictions on the company in the way that it was handled. I hope you're familiar with this term, fag packet, cigarette packet engineering, is a term often used where the design engineer does not fully document his thinking and product development stages. He thinks that documenting the finished product characteristics is enough. Often the same process will be gone through again in subsequent designs, whereas if the thinking and the rationale had been documented on why the design might have been abandoned or failed, it would have prevented the process having to be repeated again. There's a note that the final design review must be carried out by others who have not been involved in the design process. This is to show an independent group or person other than the development team. This can be difficult to achieve, the independence in a small, if you've only got a small design team. But you've got to try and demonstrate that you've got an independent review without any biasness. Another fresh pair of eyes looking at what's been done. Confusion often exists between verification and validation of designs. Verification is to check, whereas validation is to prove. Examples of calculations would be simulations or computer modeling to artificially test the design envelope. The output documentation must also be reviewed, not just the calculations. And the final part, comparing the new designs, they must be compared with other designs to look for any difference and similarities. Now, sorry, I think I'm going to go back a slide. Sorry, I apologise. We've jumped there. Yes, I apologise for jumping a slide forward. This slide is on design and development validation. And it's clarified there for prototype tests and functional and then field performance. The prototype validation, the design may be sent to an external test house, be tested in a lab or workshop, or out in the field where it is tested against similar conditions it will face when put into service. The functional testing, before the finished design is released to the customer, it needs to undertake functional and operational tests, which may bring out factors not encountered during the prototype validation trials. And the field performance data, for example, complaints where the product is in service or retrofit mods carried out, excuse me, when the product is in service, are all examples of life cycle testing showing the design has performed over time. Change control is very important throughout the entire life cycle of the design. Design and development costs a lot of money, especially when they result in failure. Now, often a product is launched before the design has been fully proven, with a brief put out that the company will support their product with a strong field service support team. This rarely happens in practice. You only have to think about recent car recalls, which, when they investigate and find the root cause, it was the design failure. Now we're on to the purchasing process now. And in the 9000 2015 version, there's a significant change in the terms. Now, another significant change in terms of purchasing and outsourcing are being replaced with external provision of goods and services. Again, I'm just outlining the changes reflected in ISO 9001. How these changes will impact on 29000 is still in the melting pot. However, as it is a derivative of 9001, then the likelihood is the 29000 will follow suit. That might not be the case. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Now in 9001, the selection and evaluation process is often done by sending a questionnaire out to a potential supplier. This is often created from a competitor or from the internet. It is of no value to the organisation. It's completed and returned by the supplier only to gather dust in a drawer in the buyer's office. Criteria should be selected that meets the needs of the organisation. For example, how often were goods delivered on time to the correct spec? What problems are being experienced in the production lines? All that needs feedback so that you constantly improve the quality of the supplier, the raw materials. Outsourcing is another area where the buyer and quality functions do not work together to define and monitor meaningful criteria to ensure the outsourced process is under control. They rely on the outsourced organisation to provide good product. This is how it should be, but it needs verifying by the parent organisation, not just take on trust. Also, sending sample product for evaluation is fine, but monitoring performance over time is even more important. Standards can slip, especially if there are problems in the organisation or a change in the management team, or they're going through hard times. They start cut corners. In the 2015 version of 9001, the requirements are more stringent. For example, a re-evaluation of suppliers to look at the rest of the organisation or opportunities that are open to it. Often purchase orders are vague and often not reviewed properly. There's a tendency for the buyer to procure on price and ignore other parts of the review process. Usually it's done from a database with an item master file controlled totally by engineering, and the buyer only has to discuss price. But as far as ISO 9000 or 29000 is concerned, the orders have to be checked before they're placed with the supplier to ensure that everything, the part numbers, what they want, etc., any requirements for sending samples or things like that, all have to be on the purchase order. That's the basic contract between the two organisations. Verification of purchase product. Verification is often done by the goods in department by the parent company, inspecting the raw materials. This is expensive, and these days send material back has knock-on delays, which extend the delivery times and destroy reputations. The policy should always be to inspect at source, with the function of the parent organisation being quality assurance rather than a quality control one. This is all about measurement. Criteria is often done in the shape of a quality plan, but usually relies heavily on the knowledge and attitude of whoever is performing the inspection. During quality assurance product audits, where the QC functions are carried out along with the criteria, should be audited in light of complaints, production and field failures. It is too easy to become complacent and assume your processes are still performing in the same way. Take your eye off the ball. Just when you think things are fine, then that's when you start getting problems. Travelers and route cards are traditional ways of processing products. Bar charting, along with other software packages, coupled with other methods, for example, CCTV cameras, are other ways of monitoring your processes. Capturing who performed the task, who checked and tested it, how it was packaged and distributed are critical to giving assurances, and also a way of protecting the company in the event of complaints, by being able to demonstrate where the incident occurred through record investigation. Process validation. The validation will often be specified by the customer, who will want a whole point put on the quality plan so that the representative can become involved at critical parts in the process. Non-destructive testing, welding and heat treating are all special processes that need accurate records kept to prove the results as a means of assuring customers that product performs as specified. Quarter to 10. So I've got a little while, so I'm going to take it a little further forward. In the oil and gas industry, traceability is considered extremely important. This can be expensive, with 10% of contracts being allocated to providing documentation, part of which is the traceability. Again, this technical standard is more explicit than 9001, whereby replacement parts need to be traceable and also control features identified. And in one company I worked with, there was a process called 3.1C relating to castings, where the certification body, in this case Lloyd's inspectors, were responsible for the transfer of markings onto the fitments from the original castings, because the original fourth marking had been machined out. In 9001, the inspection test status are within the clause on traceability. In process, inspection point, etc. Often this is done by means of a traveller outlining the process along with the inspection test operations the product has gone through. Customer property is often poorly defined under the 9001 quality management system, where kits or parts are sent in from a customer not adequately controlled. In 29001, customer property must be controlled with the inspection process and preservation clearly defined.
Thank you, David, for this great presentation, and I want to thank all the attendees as well for joining us. We hope you have enjoyed the first part of the webinar, and we will continue next week at the same time, so please register on PCB website for the next webinar, part 2. We have received all your questions, and because today time is limited, we will answer them individually by email. Thank you very much, everyone, and wish you a wonderful day. Bye.